I want to thank everybody and welcome you to Mastering the Art of B2B Email Marketing in 2015 and beyond. My name is Kevin Miller. It's my pleasure to have an opportunity to speak to everybody today. As we mentioned, today's session is being recorded, so you will get a copy of or a link, I should say, to today's video following today's session, along with a PDF copy of the slides. Before we get into the session, I want to encourage everybody as we go through, if there's a topic that you want to talk about, if there's a question you want to ask, we encourage you to do so. We won't answer the questions during the session. We will answer those questions when we get to the end. And we won't read your name. We will only read the question and do our best to answer it. So quickly, a couple of things that we plan on covering today: the current state of email marketing, what are the trends, what are the statistics, etc. Paradigm shift towards buyer journeys, self-directed selling, and more fun things. We're going to talk about content. You can't have a discussion about email marketing best practices without discussing the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is content development. We're also going to talk and understand the mechanics of nurture email programs. One of the biggest things that we're dealing with today as marketers is the newfound abilities to do reactional, behavioral nurture programs that are targeting buyers at certain stages of their journey. We're also going to talk about some sample programs and what are some of the key best practices that you can use to help you get started. So real quick, the current state of email marketing. First of all, email is still really, really important. It's widely used. And believe it or not, given all the other channels, the social, the otherwise, it's growing in use on an almost daily basis. And there's some rational reasons for that. There are simply better tools available to the average B2B marketer today at an affordable cost than there were some time ago. The email continues to provide the straightest line to ROI of any B2B marketing tactic, hands down. And while email continues to be a vital channel, the tactics, strategy, and methods are changing radically, however. So we pulled some statistics up here from Regalix, which is one of their studies in 2015 about digital and online budget, and in terms of what they were going to use as part of their marketing goals for last year. And email came up second only to a corporate website at 71%. There's many studies, and I could pull a dozen charts, which are going to talk about the importance of email marketing. It's been fashionable to say, hey, we want to move away from outbound, we want to move to inbound, we want to focus on SEO, we want to focus on our social channels, etc. And for a period of time, there was a little bit of a philosophical movement away from direct outbound email campaigns. And I think people have come around to realize that email marketing is not dead, it's not dying, it's not even slowing down. In fact, it's growing exponentially with the advent of nurture-based programs, which is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time as we get towards the later part of today's discussion. Statistics. It's always good to put some statistics out here because some of these are very meaningful and they're thought-provoking. So a couple of things. The biggest B2B content marketing challenge for most marketers is producing enough content. Okay, this is from Marketing Prof's 2013 B2B Content Marketing Benchmarks and Trends, not very different from the statistic that they put out this past year for 2014. And frankly, it's probably going to be very similar when they do their 2015. Producing enough content is hands down one of the biggest challenges that marketers face today. And content, as you all know, is the fuel that drives email marketing, especially today. And we'll talk about how content is so much more important today than it has been in the past. 56% of B2B companies are using CRM software to help maximize their lead gen results. Why is that relevant to email marketing? It is because with respect to nurture marketing programs are predicated upon having sales and marketing aligned, both at a technology level, meaning your marketing automation system talks to your CRM system, and that there's processes in place for being able to deal with the leads as they move through different stages of a nurture program. Customer acquisition and lead nurturing. 32%, 22%, 27% of B2B marketing respondents, respectively, as the two primary goals of email programs. Customer acquisition at 32%, lead nurturing 27%. This number is only going to grow each and every year. It's not a legacy channel anymore. Okay, if you look down in the title, B2B, email marketing, a legacy channel continues to deliver. The only legacy part about email marketing are traditional newsletter e-blasts. Everything else has been very much modernized to how people buy today. And that's really what we're going to get into in the beginning of this discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about the notion of self-directed selling. Okay, the buyer journey. What is that all about? And what does it mean that the buyer journey has become self-paced? There's a very popular statistic that came out of Serious Decisions and a study that they had done about 2 years ago, which was a pretty good study as far as having real statistics and real study, traditional study guidelines associated with it, etc. And what they found was as much as 70% of somebody's buy cycle, their evaluation of a product or service, may be self-directed and completed prior to sales engaging with somebody. And this is a vital piece of information that we have to understand as marketers today. What does self-directed engagement by buyers mean? They use the web predominantly as a mechanism to find things that they may want to purchase. They then use what we call the social web to do deeper evaluation of these products and services by themselves. And then finally, when they narrow down their choices through this social web evaluation, and I'll explain what that is in just a moment, then and only then are they ready to engage directly with a salesperson. So what does that mean? I could probably better illustrate that in the following graph, the graph that we call the lower intestine graph. It does look like that a little bit. And what it does is it tries to break down the stages of a buyer journey, okay? And it breaks it down into 3 parts. You have awareness, you have consideration, and you have purchase. The awareness part is when people are going out and they're finding things on Google and they're finding things that they're looking for by keyword search. The consideration is a totally different animal. This is this notion of what we call a social web. And don't let that name fool you. This is not Twitter. This is not LinkedIn. This is not Facebook. This is what we call the sum total of a digital footprint of your organization. It's a combination of your corporate website, your Twitter account, your Facebook. People are using not only the traditional e-channels of web, they're also using other things, social sites, blogs, peer review, independent research. People are much more savvy in leveraging the content that we've pushed out on the web over the years to get to the point where they can actually self-educate. Prior to going to purchase decision phase, the purchase decision phase is where the buyer engages with the seller and they negotiate to closure. Now, in years past, salespeople at an organization had much more control over what's going on in this little green oval. Today, we have little or no control over what's going on in that green oval. And the reason behind that is as marketers, we have rushed to push as much content as we possibly can on this sum total digital footprint that we can to get found, to get noticed. We've shoveled content out into the internet world and have lost control or lost the linkage to the information coming back in. So we have given buyers the ability to sell without our help through content syndication. How do we get that control back? What does that even have to do with email marketing? Well, we're going to get into that in a little bit. Understanding buyer journeys. We have to understand the steps that our buyers are going to go through in this awareness, consideration, and purchase phase. How do we do that? Well, first we have to research. And one of the ways that we can do research is go out on the web independently on your own and search for what you sell. And take yourself through a buyer journey. How far can you get? How much information can you get your hands on about you, about your competitors? Figuring out who's talking about you, where people are talking about you, where people are talking about your products and services. You need to learn where and how your buyers consume and acquire content. And the only way to really do that is to be a buyer yourself. Learn the types of content that your competitors and complementary information sources put out. Okay, going out and doing competitive research online is one of the most valuable ways to help you understand what content that we need to develop and how do we need to distribute it. Use evolving email tactics such as nurture marketing programs to communicate with these self-directed buyers on their terms. What does that mean? What I mean is that very few people will come out of the middle or consideration phase and engage with you directly until they feel that they've satisfied everything that they wanted to find here. And oftentimes, we can't engage with them until they are ready. When I say engage, I mean speak one-to-one, human to human, on a telephone call. We cannot wrestle people out of that stage the way we used to be able to with cold calling, etc. It's very, very difficult. But we can use tactics like nurture program marketing to engage with people digitally on their terms while they're still in the consideration phase. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation because that's going to be very relevant. So we can't have this discussion without having a discussion about content, because if you agree with what we just said, we're pushing tons and tons and tons of content out electronically. So let's talk a little bit about content. There's always great graphs that talk about different content marketing usage among technology marketers or B2B marketers. You've got things like social media content, case studies, videos, blogs, e-newsletters, e-books, the list goes on and on and on and on. Each year it seems like there's a few more lines added to this bar chart, meaning there's a diversity. There's many new types of content to meet the growing number of channels. And the more content we put out, the more control we are potentially relinquishing in the consideration phase of the lower intestine graphic. Direct response to how people discover and evaluate solutions online. As marketers, we're responding to this buyer journey at the same time we're feeding and self-propagating it. And there is a flood of content. Everybody's producing good content. There are agencies that exist in multitude today that just produce content and distribute content for companies if you don't have people internally to do it. Content is simply flooding the market. It makes getting your content noticed much more of a challenge, whether that content is digital, whether that content is coming through fulfillment via email. Think about what's in your inbox right now. How are you going to notice a message from somebody in an inbox that can exceed 300 to 400 messages a day? So what is working content marketing? So these were some effectiveness ratings on the tactics that technology manufacturers use. Now, again, these are not going to necessarily be directly applicable across every single vertical market segment, but generally speaking, these statistics are going to be relatively consistent amongst most B2B selling environments. Webinars and webcasts, videos, case studies, in-person events, blogs, white papers, research reports, ebooks, newsletters, infographics, etc. It's talking about who says they're more effective or who says they're less effective. I've always been a big proponent of the use of webinars as educational content that's meant to teach, but at the same time engage. And having produced over probably 450 of them over the years, I would happily agree with that 70%. But there's other things that we can do as well. There's lots of other content that we can use effectively. We can string these different pieces of content together in these nurture programs that we're going to discuss shortly. Video consumption, something to consider. It rises each year. It rises in importance each year. And why do you think that is? If somebody asked me that question, I'd say, well, because I don't have human beings talking to human beings as much in the consideration stage. So at least maybe in the YouTube generation, I can put out a 2 to 3 minute video to engage with somebody in a way that I may have engaged live in years past. Blogs, research, ebooks, other evergreen content is important, and it fills in a lot of the gaps, and it gives you that book or bank of content that you're going to need to execute modern email marketing campaigns. There are challenges. The challenges for creating content are many. Time constraint being the biggest obstacle creating content. In my roles here at Salesfusion and consulting roles and roles at other companies over the years, any marketing role I've been in where I've dealt with other companies, they all say they don't have the time to create the content. They may have some of the smartest people in the world working in that organization who are absolute experts in their field, and they never have time to produce a blog post. They never have time to write 400 words. They never have time to help with a research paper. They never have time to do an on-demand product demonstration. That has to be solved. No dedicated resource internally, right? If your people are experts and they don't have the time to produce the content, can you bring people in to help extract that content from them and transform that content into media that can be used in email programs and other B2B campaigns? Is outsourcing content a feasible alternative? If you simply don't have the budget, the time, or the resources to hire or leverage internal resources, then you may want to go out and outsource content. Acquiring customer stories, okay? Customers talking about you is hands down one of the most effective selling tools, and it's also one of the more difficult tools to get. So how can you go out and you can acquire customer stories? So given how people find, how they research, how they consume content in the buy cycle, not investing in content is not an option. It simply is not an option for companies anymore. You have to solve this problem. or you can have the most powerful marketing automation solutions with the fanciest nurture programs that will simply sit idly by. And the other thing that you have to take into consideration, no matter what you think about content, what your buyers think about content is what matters. And every buyer on the planet, old, young, middle-aged, are adapting to how they can sell themselves online. So you have to adapt to that. And if you don't adapt, you're going to go extinct. So what does this mean for B2B email marketing? Firstly, we have to shift resources away from batch and blast strategy to nurture-based programs. Hands down, this is one of the biggest things that's going on from a tactics standpoint today. And that means using both drip or list-based nurtures as well as trigger or behavioral-based nurtures. And I'll explain what both of those are as we get a little deeper into this. Developing a logical content funnel that matches your buyer journey. And what is a content funnel? Think of a sales funnel. Begins wide, goes to narrow. The same holds true for a content funnel where we've got our best stuff at the top. You're going to catch the most people. You're going to generate the most inbound lead volume with the best content, whether that's webinars, whether that's a research paper, you commissioned an analyst to write a paper, you have a really compelling customer case study. You have to put the good stuff at the beginning and then progressively work your way down to product information. If you begin any communication, if you begin any nurture program or email program with a product information, your programs are simply going to fail. So develop logical content funnel. Build your list through lead capture and other channels using high-value content. You know, there's obviously the list acquisition strategy, which is fraught with danger. There's also your house file that you're going to have access to. But at the end of the day, how do we organically build our email marketing list? Call to actions on your website, in advertisements, webinars, videos, white papers, infographics, signing up to receive blog alerts, having simple, easy to get to, easy to complete call to actions on your entire digital footprint is going to be very, very important. We want to talk a little bit about getting started with nurture programs. For those of you out there, I'd be curious, if there's questions about nurture programs, but I'd like to put the thought out there of how many of you out here are doing nurture programs today. I'd love to hear from folks. If you're doing nurture programs and you're having any success, please, by all means, use the question function. Tell a quick blurb about your experience with a nurture program. If it's something that you're interested in, if it's something you're considering, I'll pull a couple of those out at the end and we can kind of talk about those. So I encourage folks to interact that way. It's a little better than a poll. But feel free to tell us, this is something we're doing, this is something we really want to do, this is something we've tried and failed, this is something we've tried and been pretty successful with, and here's why. Love to hear your story. Again, we won't read your name, we'll just read the comments at the end. So first of all, what is it? It's a series of communications that incorporate both marketing and sales actions within the same campaign workflow. There may be different definitions on the market. I will tell you right now that I believe that is the absolute best definition of a nurture program. Because when you remove the sales action piece from a nurture campaign, it becomes a drip campaign. That's all. And those have been around a long, long time. So nurture programs are a combination of marketing and sales actions within the same campaign workflow. Okay, and while we take some screenshots from within our product, nurture program design is not going to look that different, no matter how you build it out. Even if I wanted to sketch this thing out in Visio, but what I want to call out is, what does it mean to have sales actions? We'll talk about that at the end, but that's something to think about. Sales actions have to be a part of it. They're behavioral, reactive, content-driven email campaigns. They can be trigger or drip-based. What does that mean? So a drip-based nurture program is one in which we either create a segment and put a segment into the campaign, or we have a list and we put a list in the beginning of a campaign and we let them work their way through. A trigger-based campaign is more of a one-to-one campaign. That's where we create the campaign and we set the criteria for how people enter it. And that could be a lot of different ways. You can have people enter a trigger-based nurture via filling out a form, completing a question on a form a certain way in a customer sat survey. Maybe somebody comes out and they go to your website. Maybe a sales rep makes a change to a record inside of the CRM system, which then triggers a nurture program. We'll come back to that example in just a moment as well. And they're also going to be somewhat matched to the buyer journeys that hopefully you've done your research on. They're also going to be matched to a logical content funnel, meaning the best stuff's in the beginning, and then we're going to progressively work you through the process and get you to the point where we're talking about our product or our service. We don't want to do that in the beginning. Why is nurture marketing so very, very, very important? And I don't want to underestimate the importance of this. They're important not because we sell one, because whether you buy it from Salesfusion or you buy it from another vendor, you're going to need to adopt nurture marketing if you want to stay ahead and if you want to keep on pace with your competition who may be mastering how to disseminate content in the digital world today. They're automated and optimized. Okay, automated from the sense that I can build this and let people flow through it. I don't have to go out, create a new campaign, hit send, go out, create a new campaign, hit send. I can have a really good campaign built, and then people can continuously enter that campaign for as long as the content within that campaign stays fresh. And we can run more than one simultaneously. We can have multiple nurture programs running simultaneously, which are constantly bringing people in, running them through the program, qualifying them, and hopefully moving them over to sales. They deliver more relevant content based on a person's actions or profile. Especially when you get into the trigger world, you can set behavioral-based targets where people are coming to your website and consuming a piece of content. Let's say you're a manufacturer of a widget and you sell 3 different widgets, one to healthcare, one to finance, and one to government. Okay, if somebody's coming into your website and they're having an interaction with you, and we're able to identify who they are, and they select obviously the government piece, then we can put them down the government path. So you could deliver more relevant content. It's an oversimplistic example, but it's very important to note. What else does it do? They also facilitate sales role in the lead gen process. Okay, so this goes back to that definition, the definition that at least Salesfusion and others stick pretty closely to, that it's a hybrid between marketing and sales actions. If we look at the diagram on the right-hand side, okay, one of the things you're going to see in a step is called add a task. Okay, so in a traditional drip marketing builder, what you're doing is you're sending an email, waiting to see if somebody opened it, pausing, then sending the next email. Waiting to see if they opened it, waiting to see if they clicked it, pausing, then sending the next email. And those are great. We do those for newsletter campaigns. There's still a lot of uses of those type of email programs. In a true nurture design, okay, the example may be I put somebody into a campaign, I market to them, they take a call to action, I then trigger an alert inside of the CRM system and assign that alert to the salesperson assigned to that lead in CRM, okay, because you've got both systems talking now. And that salesperson may then pick that lead up, work it, but let's say they leave 5 voicemails. Rather than just walk away from that lead and abandon it, which unfortunately happens more often than not, they could just change the status. Turn that status back to remarket or nurture. And then the marketing system, because of that connectivity into CRM, is able to say, okay, this lead has come back to me now. Now I'm going to put them in at the 3rd step of this program and keep running them through it. And it becomes a tennis match back and forth between marketing and sales, with marketing continuously pinging sales, letting them know when things happen, encouraging sales to make a human outreach. Because the goal of nurture marketing is to get salespeople on the phone with prospects. The goal of nurture marketing is to engage people in that lower intestine stage, that really tangled, mangled stage where people are out evaluating lots of things. This is our chance. If we can read and react to what people are doing in these campaigns, we're going to hopefully get our sales team, quote unquote, back in the game. If we do this well, if we do this properly, if the integration between the systems is properly set up, this can not only reduce, but it can fully eliminate lead leakage between marketing and sales. Again, not reduce it, fully eliminate it, which is a goal that we should all have as marketers. Now, there are benefits, of course, of using lead nurture programs. These were some statistics that came out of the Nurture Marketing Benchmark Report from Demand Gen Report, a great website that reports on a lot of this stuff. 61% said they had the ability to segment prospects based on interest and behaviors. 73% said they had better response to campaign offers. I will tell you from personal experience that open rates will exceed 40, 50, and 60% once you get past step 1 of a nurture program. So you may have less people in it than we would with, let's say, a traditional email blast, but those people that you have in that nurture program are going to be well-engaged people. Those are going to be people that we really do want to talk to. If I had a list of 50,000 people and I had an open rate of 2%, okay, that's great, but that 2% may have open rates of 40, 50, and 60% as they get into the 3rd step of your nurture program. At the end of the day, those are the people we're probably going to have an opportunity to sell to. 61% of the respondents said they were generating more warm sales-ready leads. That's not a wildly compelling statistic. It's more of like, yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense because you're not throwing lots of unqualified suspects over into CRM. You're running them through these nurture programs for a period of time, and then you're putting them into the CRM system. So after they've had multiple touch points, meaning there's also going to be higher acceptance of the leads from sales. Meaning if more of these sales leads are warm because they've made it through 3 steps of your campaign, chances are they're going to be much more pre-qualified, so to speak, for sales. 31% had a lower cost for qualified leads, right? If we're not having to touch these leads 5, 10, 15 times with call center reps, we're doing it with nurture programs, it's obviously a lot cheaper to send an email than it is to pick up the phone and make a call. Okay, so some nice benefits that people get from these. It's not all rosy, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. Okay, there are challenges to implementing these programs. 39% said a lack of insight into best practices. We're preventing them, right? There's not a lot of best practices on the market. There's not a lot of blueprints. I can't get a Nurture Marketing for Dummies book yet that says do this first, then do this, then do this. There's broad-based best practices, which you're listening to right now, but there's no blueprint yet. I think those things are coming, but right now there's not. So how do vendors like Salesfusion address those? We address those through onboarding programs, through ongoing training, ongoing best practices. So the vendors are rolling up their sleeves and trying to figure out ways that we can teach our customers to use this more effectively. But there's just simply not enough literature out in the market about how to build these step 1, step 2. But that is coming, and that's changing. 66% said developing targeted content, no shock there. We have to deal with the content issue. 37% shortage of data on which leads to nurture. Where do you begin? Which leads do you start with? Okay, maybe you begin, maybe the several hundred people that register for this webinar, that's the beginning of a nurture campaign. Don't worry, we're not going to bombard you with email after this campaign. But I'm saying that's something that you need to be thinking about. We had a very good phone call this morning internally at Salesfusion with a very important customer of ours, and we had a strategy session around nurture marketing, and this is somebody that sells real high-end merchandise, and we talked about pulling over data from their ERP system on products that they bought, and then deciding which path to put them into, depending on which product that they bought. Okay, so that's the kind of conversations you have to have internally, long before you ever start building an email. Okay. 32% said lack of support from the sales team in following up on nurtured leads. Sales and marketing alignment cannot be achieved through bits and bytes and technology. There has to be top-down process reengineering that occurs in an organization if sales and marketing can truly work together. Getting your content house in order. So here's some tips for getting started. Number 1, nurture marketing, as I said, combines both marketing and sales actions. The ability to deliver personalized content over an extended period of time is key. Content should follow a funnel from educational at the top to product at the bottom. Sales needs to be engaged in the actual campaign via tasks and alerts. And content should probably be delivered from the perspective of the salesperson. What does that mean? We can personalize the email, so not only the signature in the email, but the from address in the email can come directly from the salesperson. So it looks less like a marketing campaign to a recipient and looks more like a one-to-one communication between salesperson and prospective buyer. Plan your program with sales. If you're going to be developing a program, and like I said, I had the benefit, and I love participating in these type of things. I had the benefit of sitting in an initial strategy session this morning about nurture marketing, and it was like a kickoff meeting. And it was basically very little talk about the actual technology, although you have to relate the technology to your plan, because you don't want to plan something that the technology can't support. So you have to work within a framework, and you have to understand how that framework works. But beyond that, it's really about when's the right time to do this. When's the right time to put them down this path? At what point should we recycle them back to the beginning, right? And you should be doing the same thing with sales. You should have an outline of the program, including the duration, what are the goals, and what are the sales-related actions. And then you have to gain mutual agreement on what action sales will take and within what time period. Again, when you think about back to this example here on the right-hand side, you'll notice that we're taking people through an email. We're saying, did you click it? If yes, I'm going to set an alert to the contact owner, and then I'm going to set a task inside of the CRM system, whatever that may be. And basically, sales has to do their part at that point. They've got to pick up the phone and make a call and change the disposition of that lead, so they either pull them out of the campaign or put them back in. Review the data. that will push to your CRM system, right? So make sure sales knows what information is going to go to CRM, and they know what to do with that information. Generally speaking, you should begin with short, basic programs, 3 to 5 steps, 2 to 3 week periods, and along the way you should stop, you should measure, you should analyze, and use your best stuff, because the people who are going to make it through the first one are going to be put into others. What do I mean by that? Find your best content that you have in your organization. If it's an infographic, if it's a killer white paper that you commissioned with Forrester or Gartner, use your best stuff. If it's a really good webinar with a great speaker, use that first, because that first impression is going to dictate whether those people will, number one, stay in the campaign, and number two, will they participate in other campaigns. Ensure you've got a high enough sample size to generate meaningful data. If I'm going to build a nurture program for the first time, don't put 10 people in it. Put 1,000 people in it, okay? And make sure that you've got a statistically significant number that we can say this was either successful or it was not successful. Consider a drip-based approach with a clean segment or list. If you've got a segment in the system that you haven't saturated too much in the past, that might be a good way to start. And then again, think back, use your best stuff. Good segment, good list, quality, clean list with your best content is a great way to begin down a path of nurture marketing. Tie in sales actions to each step of the campaign. So set a follow-up task after 1 to 2 interactions by a lead, and CRM tasks should be native. Follow-up tasks with a detailed email alert to encourage direct follow-up. Ensure sales knows the process, the reason, the context behind the task alert. If you're going to be setting tasks inside of the CRM system, you need to make sure that sales knows what they're going to be getting. Okay, and then finally, focus in on the right analytics. So you should analyze the results of your programs early and often, and you should look beyond the basics. You know, we all want to know opening clicks, right? I mean, we're all, born, bred, and trained marketers to look for the basic statistics like that. But I want to know how deep people go and when they drop off. Actually, one of the best statistics that you can pull out of a nurture program is the drop-off point, because then that will tell us how we should build other ones in the future. If people continually drop off at step 4, either the email at step 4 stinks and the content is no good, or people just get fatigued and then they've had enough. They get sick of seeing your name. And then going forward, you should probably build all your programs at 3-step programs and then engage sales, and then rinse and repeat them out. Review the analytics with sales to confirm the steps and the validity of them. Share with the exec management team to gain buy-in for additional content curation. Okay. If you have a marketing automation system in place, and if you don't, Salesfusion could certainly be that. But if you don't have the content, running these type of short burst programs, showing the results to the team, can help you go out and secure that dedicated copywriter, can help you secure the procurement of an agency to help you produce content. Okay, so use these as a way of making your case to senior management to get more, because at the end of the day, you need content. It's just that simple. But sometimes it's very difficult to convince a senior level executive that we need content. And they'll say, well, we've got brochures, we don't need content, we've got plenty. Or they just simply don't understand the role of content in marketing today because they're not trained marketers. So having this type of information in hand will go a long way to helping you procure more content. So that's going to bring us to the end of the one way, and we're at 40 minutes, which is about where I like to stop. I would certainly want to field some questions from the group. And it looks like we do have a lot of questions on the floor, which is great. So, by all means, take this time as we are going to be winding up with the Q&A portion to submit questions, and we'll do our best to field them. I also want to note to the folks that came in after the initial part of the presentation today that video is going to be available, a PDF is going to be available, and depending on the amount of questions that we've got to field, we will likely create an FAQ document that we will send out to you after the fact. With that, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording. So the recording portion of the session